Howdy folks, and welcome back to the fourth part in my Bad Boys of Badab series. We've got 4 more chapters to do in this series. I did have a squad of 5, but I've left the 5th for something else. Comments down below, let me know which other chapter I can add to this. But we're going to start things off with some grey, ironclad grey here onto one of these miniatures. I did pick up the Combat Patrol at Adepticon for the Red Corsairs, so I got some more Red Corsair Raiders to play with here. We're going to start off with a Red Scorpion. We're going to start off with a base coat, just an overbrush over a Chaos Black spray of this grey from Army Painter here. And like I said, this is an overbrush, so we're going with top to bottom pretty much, leaving the dark sort of black in the most deepest of recesses, but catching most of the miniature with this mid-grey colour. Okay, the next one's a tricky one. This is Firehawks, and I'll be honest, I've been saving these guys till last because I wasn't quite sure how to tackle them. I've got a few images as reference here, and these guys I knew were going to be a pain in the arse. So again, I Chaos Black sprayed all of these guys, and for the Firehawk, I went with Evil Sun's Scarlet from Citadel as an all-over overbrush on this guy too. In retrospect, I probably could have started with a white base coat. This would have been a lot easier, otherwise throwing down several layers of this Evil Sun's Scarlet just to get the right balance. These guys, I'm not sure which successor they are from. Are they an Ultramarine successor or a Blood Angel successor? I'm not actually sure. Do let me know though. Bit of a kit bash on this one with the 2 swords. I just thought he looked most like the Firehawk, really. This is a very vivid red, almost an orange actually, so I wanted to start with around an orange. There are oranges, reds and yellows on a Firehawk and a little bit of gold too. These guys are very, very bright, and I have to say outside of my comfort zone a little bit in terms of the overall brightness. Again, this is an overbrush, and you can see now already that this is a somewhat less opaque paint in that it takes a little bit more coverage, several layers of this to fully cover the black undercoat underneath. For our 3rd Marine here, we have got a heretic version of the Marines Errant, I believe they're called. These guys have got to be an Ultramarine successor, surely. I've read a little bit about them and they're pretty cool. However, I have already done a Nova Marine, and the Nova Marines, when you look at them, are quite a similar scheme. I decided to go matte for the Nova Marine in the blue and white quarters. For this guy, I have seen them depicted as more of a metallic, so we're going to go with half and half metallic silver and blue on this guy. Starting with Ironbreaker, which is a nice mid-silver from Citadel. We're going to use a damp sponge here and just hit the entire miniature from above with this Ironbreaker silver to establish our base coat over a black spray. Now you'll notice this is episode 4 in this series. If you go back to the first couple of episodes, you'll notice that I did use a lot of extra texture in Typhus Corrosion underneath my black prime. Now this wasn't for everybody, and I got a lot of comments saying that they thought it was frosting from the paint, or that the paint was too thick, etc. It was deliberate, and I did go for more texture and more grimdark. These guys are still going to be grimdark, of course, but I am going for a slightly smoother finish just because I feel like I did get a lot of very confused comments when I did my Lamenters and a few of the other chapters early on. Last of the 4 here is the Raptor Legion. These guys, I'm pretty sure, are a Raven Guard successor, and I have to be honest, one that I've been really looking forward to paint. I just haven't figured out a way to tackle these guys until now. I've watched a few videos and a few other people doing these guys, and I decided to do my own version here. I started again with a Chaos Black spray and overbrushed a mid sort of chocolatey brown from Army Painter all over these guys as a foundation for the green that we're going to build up gradually. Midnight Olive, Tainted Garden and Thicket Grove are 3 really nice greens from Army Painter's John Blanche kits. I think these guys come from 3 different sets and they are all fantastic paints. So I'm going to use all 3 of these to build up my green on this awesome stealthy Raptor Legion Marine. So I'm moving up in the world as well. You notice I bought myself an Army Painter wet palette when I was at Adepticon. This could change things for me a little bit. I've always been a bit reluctant. I'm too old school and I usually go straight from the pot. However, I decided that I should move things on a little bit now that I'm doing more painting content, and I finally bought a wet palette, and I'm sure you'll be happy that my blends will be slightly smoother going forwards. I'm going to start with a stipple of the darkest olive colour here. I'm using an old brush with flayed ends, and I'm just stippling this all over the sort of top layers and the big armour panels of this Marine, building up that green gradually and letting some of that brown chocolatiness shine through underneath. Back to our Firehawk. This guy took a few coats just to get anywhere near where I wanted, and of course at this point I'm going to go with a slightly lighter colour over the top of this in Emberwell, I believe it's called. Again, one of the John Blanche Army Painter set colours here. This I am going to sponge all over the miniature in an effort to push this further into the orange sort of scheme that we're going for. You'll notice that things are still quite blotchy and patchy at this point, but the whole idea behind using this slightly lighter colour is to get rid of that. The shoulder pads will end up being slightly lighter as well, and I'm actually going to attempt some freehand flames later on as well, which again is another reason why I left this guy till last. Flicking back to the Raptor, things are looking pretty good so far with that brown and black in the recesses building up with the olive. We're now going to move on to the mid-green choice here, which I believe is Tainted Garden, again with a stipple from above, but this time leaving some of that darker olive on the lower parts of the armor panels. Finally onto Thicket Grove, the lightest green here, and my final sort of highlight for this guy. In favour of stippling, I'm actually going to use a finer brush here and do sort of an edge highlight and build up some highlights towards the finer uppermost points on the armour panels of this model. I've always really liked Raptors, but I've never actually got around to painting one. I'm already enjoying this guy though, and I have to say they're a lot less colourful, a lot more drab and a lot more sort of spec ops, I suppose, which is really, really nice. A little bit more realistic than some of the other chapters in this Badab series so far. And I think the colour palette for the Raptors is relatively easy to play around with, and also I think the results for this guy are already speaking for themselves. Finally mixing a teeny little bit of yellow into that lightest green just to get some final edge highlights and pinpoint details around the mouth, the helmet and the sort of neck guard, as well as any other higher points on this miniature, just to make things pop a little bit more. I then do the bonding studs and the backpack as well. Over to the Marine Errant, we're now going to do a dry brush of Rune Fang steel. This is a very, very bright steel, possibly the brightest steel that Citadel does. We're going to do this all over the miniature from an up to down motion, just hitting those top points of the miniature just to emphasize the metal even further. I love true metallic metals. I actually prefer them a lot to non-metallic metals generally. Because I can't actually reproduce non-metallic metals just yet, but also I just find it looks a lot more realistic generally. Something simple like this, a black base coat with silver sponged on and then just a final dry brush, and things are already looking good. Back to the Red Scorpion now, we're going to build up our first highlight, mixing in some of that original grey with some Administratum grey from Citadel as well, until I get to a nice sort of mid-grey balance that I want for this one. I'm then going to use my sponge again and just hit the tops of the model, all of those armor panels where the light might hit this guy with this slightly lighter grey. Sticking with the Red Scorpion for now, we're then going to make this blend a little bit smoother, going even lighter into the Administratum grey with a final sponge. Grey is quite a tricky colour to get right, generally speaking. You need to push the contrast a little bit, but at the same time, you don't want things to end up looking too bright either. But if you're not careful, it can look very drab indeed. Back to the Marine Errant, we're going to use our first Citadel contrast paint here, and this one is Griffcharger Grey. It's a nice cold blue grey that I tend to use on metallics like this if I want it to stay fairly bright. This is a really nice sort of all-over shade for the next step. It just brings out and emphasizes those armor panels a little bit more. Back to the Red Scorpion, and then we're going to use a final highlight of just pure Administratum grey as an edge highlight, picking out the rivets and the higher raise points on the kneecaps and the pauldrons and around the face grille as well. Back to our Marine Errant now. The Griffcharger Grey has dried in the recesses and things are looking really nice. We're then going to move on to our blue, and I'm going to pick out Citadel Contrast Talassar Blue. This is a very vivid, almost violet-y sort of blue, and I've used this on lots of metallics in the past. I really do love this colour. It really stands out and it's very bright, and I think perfect for Marines Errant. When doing a scheme that's in quarters or halves like this, the easy part is doing the sort of legs as well as the arms on a Space Marine, because things are usually split in half with a tabard in the middle, etc. So you don't have to worry about being too neat. However, of course, when you get to the helmet and the chest plate, you're going to want to be as neat as possible. And again, things are quite difficult with contrast paints, because if you do get the line a little bit squiggly and not too straight, it's not the end of the world, but you know, generally speaking, you want it as straight as possible. I tend to use the rivets on the model as a sort of guideline for where I want things to go. You also don't want to go over an area more than once with contrast paint, as it will give it a blotchy effect that you really don't want, especially if you're doing contrast metallics. So take your time, hold your breath, and just try your best. Back to the Red Scorpion. We're moving on to Corvus Black, which is one of my favorite colors from Citadel. This is an awesome color. It's almost a turquoisey, very, very dark, almost black. I tend to use this in most of my paint schemes, and I'm doing this to block out the middle of the pauldrons on this Red Scorpion. While I'm there, I'm also going to do the sort of rubber connectors in the elbows and the backs of the knees and around the bum as well. Once we've done that, we're then going to move on to our yellow. It wouldn't be a Red Scorpion without yellow, weirdly. It should be red, I suppose, but it's not. It's Moonbeam Yellow from Army Painter here. This is another one of the John Blanche ones, and I'm going to do this all around the edges of the pauldrons, as well as the sort of Mohican strip on this helmet as well. 2 thin coats needed for this job. Over to the Firehawk now. While I've got the Moonbeam Yellow out, I'm going to be using some of this on the Firehawk too. And this is where I get freaky deaky with some freehand flames. Now, with flames, you'll notice that generally speaking, the sort of outer layer or the upper end of the flame gets slightly darker generally, and the sort of base of the flame, as it gets hotter, is usually a lighter color. So I'm going to start with a sort of mid-yellow here, because this is over orange, and then I'm going to get lighter as we go towards the base of the flames. I'm thinning down the paint quite a bit here because I want things to be smooth. I do not want this too chalky. And really, it's up to you how you want to do this. I don't want to do too many squiggles, so I'm going to go for sort of 4 or 5 sort of flickers of flame here, because I feel like I don't want it to be too busy. All I'm doing really is dragging my brush down and creating vague sort of flame shapes with the point of my brush. Back to the Red Scorpion for now. We've got the yellow down on the little Mohican bit and the pauldron edge. We're now going to use Sun Petal as a final edge highlight on all those yellow bits around the side of the Mohawk, as well as the edges of the pauldrons. I've got to say, I do really like the Red Scorpions. It's a really, really strong and simple scheme, and this little bit of yellow really does make things pop against that flat grey. Back to the Firehawk, and I've done quite a lot more yellow. We did the mouth grill as well as the little doodad on his sort of faceplate there as well. Round the bottom of the legs with more flame, as well as one of the kneecaps too. Same with this guy. I'm going to use Sun Petal, as I did with the Red Scorpion, as an edge highlight on some of the yellow bits, as well as the insides of all of these flames as well. I'm going to take my time here, and I'm basically going to do a flame inside the flame with the slightly lighter color, building it towards the base of the pauldron and the base of the legs there. Then I'm going to mix some of that Sun Petal in with some pure white sky here, and just go with a very, very light final bit along the bottom of these flames, just to make things really, really pop. It's very, very bright so far, the entire scheme, and I've got to say, I'm not really liking where it's going, but trust the process. Hopefully I can sort of save this and make it look a bit more grimdark by the end of this video. Back to my comfort zone with the Raptor. That green is looking really, really nice if you ask me. I'm now going to do something else with this guy. I'm going to get out my warm skin shade, which is a nice warm brown sort of wash. Water it down slightly and use this as a sort of shade towards the bottom of the armor panels. I'm using this around the bottom of the legs, and I'm just kind of dragging it towards the bottom of the miniature to sort of simulate a bit of grime, but also just give that green a bit more definition and make it look slightly less flat with more brown put into it. Back to the Red Scorpion and indeed the rest of the four here. We're going to use Heavy Metal by Army Painter to do the gun barrel, the magazines and any other sort of gunmetal details like grenades on this miniature. I'm going to unify all four of them by using the same colours across the leathers, the gunmetal and any other sort of key details just to unify the squad a bit more. Of course, this entire army is built out of different chapters now, so I have God knows how many points for 11th edition of a Red Corsairs army, inverted commas, with all sorts of different schemes going on. So each squad has several different schemes, and I haven't repeated those schemes more than twice in the entire army. At the same time as doing these four, I was actually busy painting my Tyrant's Legion Traitor Guard as well, so I'll do another video for those guys. Stay tuned for that one. We're going to go with grey fatigues and blue accents on those guys to represent the Astral Claws affiliation. We're going to do all the leathers across these four miniatures with Banshee Brown from Army Painter now. This is just a nice flat chocolatey brown, the same brown that I used actually to base coat the Raptor. For the tabards on three of these guys, I've chosen to go with just pure Wraithbone from Citadel here, as well as any sort of skulls and wraps on these miniatures too. These pauldrons are looking quite messy on the Firehawk at this point, so I decided to go in with some Liberator Gold or Retributor Armor, I can't remember which one this is, on the edge of the pauldrons just to frame things a little better. Using a small brush here just to get a little bit more accuracy on this one. I don't want to go into the flames too much. I just want to frame the flames with the edge of the pauldron trim here. Alright, I'm loving this Raptor so far, but it's just looking very, very flat at the moment. So I've decided to push things a little bit further with going with some camo schemes here, because I just feel this is really going to fit. I'm using Root Path as an overall base coat for the cloak, as well as any other fabrics on this Raptor. I then douse all of these fabrics with some Voodoo Shade. In retrospect, I could have done this after I'd done the camo patterns, but it works just the same. For all of the metal or gunmetal parts on these miniatures, I'm going to my favourite Rattling Grime contrast paint here. This is just to dial everything back, make it look grimdark and dirty on the metal areas. I'm not even diluting this, I'm going straight in with the Rattling Grime all over these metals, and that is where I'm going to leave them. Alright, now that the Voodoo Shade has dried across the fabrics on the Raptor, we're now going to do our camo pattern, and I'm going for a darker brown here. This one again is Banshee Brown, which ties things together with the sort of undercoat that we used on this Raptor, and I'm going to do sort of random splotches. Now the thing with camo, I'm saying like I'm an expert here because I haven't really done it much. The thing with camo though, generally speaking, or patterns on your miniatures, is not to go overboard. You can always add more later. It is better to keep things minimal to begin with, and if you need to add more in terms of filling up space, you can do that later. Less is more on this one. Once I'm happy with my brown stain splotches all over this guy, I'm then going to move to Corvus Black again to do some slightly smaller little dots and blotches in between some of these darker browns as well. Again, less is more. I'm doing sort of two next to each other in most cases, as I see this on camo patterns quite a lot. And again, I don't want to fill too much space here, as I don't want it to look too busy. It tends to lose the effect if you go too far overboard with it. Finally, I'm moving to Baneblade Brown, which is a lighter brown now, and this is the lightest color on this camo, and these are going to be little dots in some of the Corvus Black areas. So wherever I put the Corvus Black, I'm going to do little dots of this lighter brown, and this is going to finish our camouflage pattern. Once you're happy with the effect, you can stop there. If you really want to go further, you can add more, but I do think, honestly, less is more with camouflage quite often, and you don't want to overcook it. Alright, it's decal time. I know some people call them decals, but that just sounds weird. I think it's decal personally, but let me know in the comments if you think I'm wrong on that one. I know I say melee wrong and melee as well, so you can never get it right in this world. Can't please everybody. But anyway, like the rest of my Badab schemes so far, I haven't got any actual chapter transfers, so we're using the Red Corsairs transfer set to tie everything together, as these are traitors that in the headcanon that I have are sort of thrall to Lufthuron, who by the way I have coming in the post. I'm going to be painting that guy up as part of the series as well. Using Micro Set and Micro Sol, these products are amazing. You'll hear me harp on about them in a lot of videos, but yeah, I use the blue one first, whichever that one is. I douse that onto the pauldron or the area that I'm going to affix the transfer to. Then after that, once that's dry, I go over with the red one, whichever that one is, and that sort of stretches the transfer and makes it sort of adhere to the surface a lot better. I've chosen a white decal for the Raptor because their Raptor insignia is usually white. For the Red Scorpion, we're using a red decal here just to make things pop even further and make it even more like a Red Scorpion. The only part of the Red Scorpion that's red is actually the scorpion on the insignia. For the Marine Errant, we haven't got a yellow decal, so I'm going to go with a gold one here, the same style that we have on the Red Scorpion, just to tie things together. I'm then going to go back to my brightest silver in Runefang steel and pick out some of the rivets and higher points on these miniatures, all 4 of them, just to bring things together and make things pop even further. While things are drying, I'm going to add some texture to the bases with Citadel's Martian Iron Crust. Now we move on to the weathering. What I've got here are 3 different oil paints, and I'm going to do a unifying wash for all 4 of these miniatures, even though the schemes are all very different. We've got some burnt umber, we've got some pure black, and we also have some Payne's grey here. The ratio is entirely up to you, but I tend to use less black in the mix as it is very overpowering. Odorless mineral spirits are added to the mix here. It's up to you how thin or thick you want your wash, but generally speaking, I tend to go for a thinner one because again, I can always add more later. When I apply my oil washes, I try to be as light-handed as possible. I haven't varnished these miniatures, so be careful. You don't want to be too abrasive. I tend to just dab it into the recesses and let the oil wash flow where it needs to flow to. Finally, some pigments. I'm using the same recipe that I've used for the entire army so far, a sort of burnt orange color, as well as a yellow, as well as a sort of spot color on top of the bases. And now what I'm going to do here is use a stippling motion to sort of stab this into the bases, making sure that I get some on the feet and the lower leg areas as well. You can be pretty liberal with this, but one thing I've noticed is the texture paint from Citadel that I used earlier is exactly the same color pretty much as this orange. So if you miss a few bits, it's absolutely fine. It adds further variation to things without looking too different. Onto the yellow now. I tend to add 1 or 2 spots on the bases just in sort of random areas. This is a sort of variation of lighting, and I tend to find just something simple like this, a little bit of color variation on the bases, really does look great when done well. Finally, the most fun part, the most satisfying part of the entire process is rimming out the bases with some Abaddon black. I absolutely love doing this, particularly when these bases are covered in overbrushing and powder from the pigments as well. I tend to do 2 coats of this just to make things really, really bold and black as well. You could totally use Goblin Green here if you are old school, but I tend to prefer black on my Grimdark miniatures. Okay, onto the beauty pageant. We are finished with these Marines, and I have to say the one that I'm most happy with is definitely the Raptor, personally. I'd love to know in the comments what you think about these guys, but honestly, out of the entire series so far, the Raptor actually might be my favorite. I know I say this with every video, but honestly, I'm really, really happy with where this guy went, particularly with the camo, actually, and this is my first time trying camo in a very, very long time, and this time it actually worked. Here is some of the camo on display on the back of the cloak here. I really, really like the vibe of this guy, and I think the base really pops next to this scheme as well. For the Red Scorpion, I really love this scheme, but I think I could have executed it slightly better. Again, we're going for very simple, quick, and effective on the tabletop. I would say that the yellow needs a little bit more work generally, but I'm fairly happy with the grey. And again, overall, things work very well and unified with the base as well. And I particularly like the little pop of red on the pauldron with that decal too. For the Marine Errant, this guy looks pretty good, and I have to say my shaky hands weren't quite accurate enough for making a pure straight line down the middle of this miniature. It was quite difficult, and I would say that's something you need to watch out for with contrast paints, because you can't really correct your mistakes that well with a scheme like this. So do take your time, and just if you've got a steadier hand than me, you'll be pretty good with it. I did choose to sort of highlight the blue areas with that bright silver as well, and I think that really unifies things together, and this guy ended up looking pretty cool too. And again, I think that colder scheme works really well with the orange base. Finally, for the Firehawk, oh, this one was so tricky, and looking at it now, it looks okay. I think some people are really going to like this, but overall, the scheme is a bit too bright for my tastes. And again, this was the one I was most hesitant for, mainly because of all the freehand, but also because I knew it would be quite a challenging and difficult one to get right. Had I done this again and started in a different way, perhaps I would have gone down the contrast paint route rather than going for flat red colors. Perhaps that would have actually looked better, slightly more modulation, maybe a different contrasting color as an underpaint perhaps. Let me know what you think. I'd love to know if anyone's painted any Firehawks. I can imagine these guys are quite scary for a lot of people. They certainly were for me. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it though. It is just a bit too bright for my general tastes, and again, doesn't really work with the base scheme that I've got here, but I had to stick with the base scheme because it is the same for the entire army so far. Anyway, I really enjoyed painting these four, particularly the Raptor, and I'd love to know what you think down below. This is not the last part. I'm going to do another video on my Traitor Guard. Those guys were a very, very quick speed paint of the, Traitor Guardsmen that I got in the sort of Combat Patrol box or the Battle box or whatever it's called, and those guys are themed on the Tyrant's Legion, so grey fatigues with blue details. I'm also going to finally get in the post my copy of Lufthuron himself and his little retinue of guys that I'll be painting up in a video too. I hope you really enjoyed this one. Stay tuned for more. Please do like, share, subscribe, and check out the Patreon too, and I'll be back with another one real soon. Peace out.